being real summary for I don't know, week 36-ish. At this point, doesn't matter. Stop counting the weeks. The letters of Paul to the churches. We did some different things. We had done a self-study. There's a self-study video with a bunch of other videos from the Bible Project put together because we didn't meet the prior week, but there was a self-study put together. It was, you could do the videos or go to your study Bibles and look at the broad strokes of each of the 9 letters to Paul. And just gonna jump in, there's some video from the actual group meeting. Now, don't really get anybody, you still just see me because it's a privacy thing, but gonna just put a little bit of that in here so you get a flavor of how it is in there and what kind of discussions we had. Really focus, like the first one is Galatians, and you'll see just kind of how it went a little bit to get a feel. Not gonna do that for all of it or any of that stuff, but just give you a little bit of a feel, and then I'll jump back in here and add some more information as we go. The other reason that I want to show you this is so you see it's really not structured like a class or a lesson. I really try my best not to do that. So you'll see it's a little bit kind of figuring out as we go. It's a concept, something we're trying, and you'll see what I mean. And we just kind of figure it out. So I don't want to raise the hand. I'm just going to assume everybody did the homework. Everybody did the homework and didn't have any issues. So what we're going to do, this is what I'm calling speed epistling. Speed epistling, because speed lettering doesn't sound as cool. So we're going to do speed epistling. What we're going to do is we're going to go through each of the 9 books. I'm going to set a timer. Huh? We'll make it work. Don't worry. We're in a group, so we encourage and lift each other up and make sure that we fill gaps. We got this covered. It's almost like that's part of what we're doing. Anyway, 9. There are 9. I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. That's our max that we can use to talk about each of the books. So we're going to go through. We're going to start with Galatians, and what we're going to do is we're going to just talk about the key concepts from Galatians. And the point of this is to quickly and concisely sum up each of these epistles, and then we'll do something else after that. But I want to start with that, but I want to, get your minds in that mindset. So we're going to kind of go through this quickly, and when we get to I don't know, there'll be certain ones that could possibly take longer. We'll deal with it as we go. But
what do you want us to do?
So hold on one second. What do I want you to do?
5.
Well, we're not gonna. 5 is the max.
Oh, that's good.
5 is the max, and the reason I'm doing 5 as the max, I'm just gonna tell you, is that's half of our time. I want to save the other half of our time for what we do after that. So it was my way of saying, well, this is gonna force us to think through it quickly and come up with bullet points and go from there. So 5 is just the max. We could just go on to the next one when we're done. Also, you're going to have a blank page. I might not have said that. It's the first time doing it. You're ready. So we want to have a blank page. And we're going to start with Galatians. And we're basically going to write it on each line what we come up with for the concepts. You're going to tell me. So I'm going to start the timer. We'll see how this goes. And I don't know if we'll go around the room or just talk or however we're going to do it. All right, let's go. Ready? Okay, fair enough. We'll figure it out. 5-minute timer started. So Galatians, key concepts. What you got? So why was he passionate? And why was he passionate with the Galatians? And you do get a feel. That's the other part that we're doing. You get a feel for Paul as we go through this. Anybody else have anything in Galatians? I don't. It might have been. You make me question that now. And Galatians was before the Council of Jerusalem, by the way. And if you remember, we talked about the Council of Jerusalem. That's where they had to figure out the divide between the Jewish law and the Gentile way. Paul calls out Peter in Galatians, which is interesting. And he calls him out for Peter was eating with the Gentiles, and then when the people from Jerusalem came, the Jews from Jerusalem and from the church that James was part of, Peter stopped doing that and started just eating with the Jewish people. And Paul's like, almost basically called him a hypocrite in there. And that's when that divide, that's when we know that's a divide. There's a divide between how the Jews act, and then that comes into play later, as we'll find out. Oh, and just draw a line under that, and we'll go to another one. So we'll go to 1 Thessalonians next. So we started there, and you heard a little bit of the questions. Again, a lot of discussion. It was interesting because someone's like, how are we going to fill 5 minutes? And the reality is I stopped timing them because we couldn't fit it into 5 minutes, to have a little bit of discussion. And I didn't want to squander the discussion. And there are things that people would say, it's like, oh, this shows us this, this, and this. And I was like, oh, yeah, but we're going to talk about that later. But then I didn't want to mess with the flow of the conversation. So I was kind of balancing between staying on task and staying on schedule and allowing some of that organic conversation to happen. It was something different we tried, and I don't know. It was good because it kind of forced us to think quickly, but at the same time, I'm not sure how well it worked, to be honest. This is one of those, the idea was better in my head most likely than reality. Now, didn't get any, didn't have anybody say anything negative per se about that. It getting through the letters as we were going, and you'll see, some of the discussion was, so you can see it was just the flow of it in quick time as we're going back and forth, and we're all writing this down, and there was a lot of, well, what did she say, or what did, so there was a lot of that as well, but that's not a bad thing. It's good because you're really paying attention or trying to pay attention to what each other has to say. Could it have been faster if I just put the notes together and so these are the things that we learned? Probably, yes, definitely. Would it have connected with the people in the room as well as them writing it down and going through that? I don't think so. So, that's just the balancing act. But as we went through, we talked about all the different books, broad strokes, and I'm sure you already figured out that it was longer than 45 minutes to get through that. So the discussion, I really wanted to split it in half and have a lot more like just open discussion about all of them together. Now we did do it. We went into summarizing it, which I'll show you a little bit about that, but I wanted to spend more time on that, but it just didn't flow. And we kind of did we got to some of that stuff in our, organic conversation with each of the books. Like, oh, this is we started connecting dots quickly. The interesting thing to me is Philippians 4, this is one of the other things. So Philippians 4:13, which is a very popular verse. And this is just kind of an aside, but if you go, it's I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Now, my question for you is this. Knowing what we do about Philippians and how he was in prison and suffering, reading that verse, what does it say to you? And it's really more about contentment. Yes. Yeah. And that was the thing is I've never read that as a contentment verse.
Yeah.
Because that's not how you
learn it as a first in Bible school, when you're in vacation.
So you can see how even though the plan was just to talk about here's what the letter, here are the key concepts of the letter, and just kind of move on. We did talk about some other stuff, and I don't want to say we got on tangents, but we we kind of discussed the things that came up for us. And just going to show you this real quick. So I had, first and second Thessalonians here. This is the video. And then I read First and Second Thessalonians, and I read it in the ESV version here, my notes and the verses from that. We didn't get into verses, we didn't go that detailed. And then this is the NIV, cultural backgrounds. And then I also looked at the NAB, which is the Catholic Bible, and looked at, I have one that's got some notes from there as well, from some commentary going into like an intro to the letter. So really that's what I kind of did. I didn't do that for every single one. I didn't get through all the books, but I did it for the video, and I did it as far as the study part of it in each of the overview intro to each of those chapters. I didn't get through reading through all the books is what I'm saying, but that wasn't the actual self-study homework. So anyway, that's what we have, and pages of it. People were going off of that, and what we were doing is, let's see if I can find. And then here's we're going to start on a fresh page or whatever. And, here's my Galatians, First Thessalonians, Second. And this is the collection of notes from the group. Someone would say, oh, well, I got this out of it. And that was the other thing that took a little bit of time, is somebody would say, well, this is what I got. And it would be like a sentence or two describing it. And absolutely nothing wrong with that, because that's how they wrote it down. But we were trying to come up with like as short as possible so we can, write it down and then move on. So we were trying to take sometimes, a few sentences or like this is what I got from it, but I don't know how to word it. So we were working through that, so we worked through that together, tried to figure out how do we word that? Okay, does this make sense? So there's a lot of time spent on that as well, which was good, because we're really trying to narrow it down and describe it as concisely as possible. And that's part of the exercise, actually, is, if you can say it simply, you kind of lock in a little bit better. So we were doing that. And so anyway, here, that's through here. This is Romans and Ephesians. So I have, let me look at this, actually. I 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of just the highlights that we discussed for each of the 9 letters. So just wanted to show you that. And then after that, we said, okay, now from all of this, what did we learn? And well, I'll show you how I fumbled around that.
What did we learn that is, so now we look at these and we want to come up with a list that is a short list that takes all of this as much as possible into account. So we're looking for common threads, connecting dots, and really trying to, in as concise a way as possible, describe Paul's letters.
All right, here's the list that we had of the end, and you're probably not going to be able to read it. So we looked at the common threads, and we came up with this list. Unity, love, faith, building up others, the grace of God, Christ-centered, salvation for all. Beware of false teachers. Stand firm in faith, surrender to God's power. Spiritual gifts and the use of them. Embracing our differences. We had some discussion about that. But, share the gospel. Imitate Christ. Freedom in Christ. And one of the other things that I mentioned as we were going through this is really kind of came to me as we were looking at all this stuff. It's, life through the lens of Scripture, which we've talked about. Hey, how do we see that through the lens of Scripture, but also with the eyes of Jesus? And I'm sure that was somewhere else. So sometimes there's nothing new under the sun, but that was one of those things that's like, oh, because I have lenses here. Because your lenses help you see things more clearly, but we also have to see with the eyes of Christ in how he viewed, and that, the church was always meant to be, Christ Church was always meant to be multi-ethnical and multi-ethnic. Everybody's welcome, that kind of thing. So anyway, here's what we came up with. Again, this was not an exhaustive list. It wasn't meant to be that. It was more of a brainstorming, like outline. What are the common things? And then the more concise, and this comes from kind of the business world, but the more concise you could say it, the more you can identify, the more easily you can identify it, the simpler it is. Well, now you have a target. Now, how do we get there? And we didn't get into, of course, we didn't get into how to do each of these things. We've actually talked about quite a few of them through the course of the Being Real group meetings and stuff like that for different things. I mean, this is like week 36 or so. But it was just it was meant to be a very quick, efficient way to get an overview of the letters, but to take what we got out of them. Not what somebody else was telling us, and what we got from the different things that we looked at, really having us look for ourselves and then coming up with a collective list. So that's what we did. And then we also had a little discussion of what our feel was about Paul, because he wrote all these, and we discussed the different approaches he took and why were they different, and who would he be and how would he be in front of us right now? Like what was your take on his personality? And we had some interesting conversation about that, which we just had some interesting conversation. You get a feel for somebody when you read multiple letters like this, and you see how the main points didn't change, but the approach did. So we tried to learn from those as well. So I think that pretty much summarizes it. There's a lot going over, but hopefully, if you weren't there, hopefully this video gets you enough information to go do this kind of thing on your own, because it really was beneficial to each of us to go and kind of look at that for ourselves, and then to collectively go, oh, that connected with you. I didn't even catch that. It was a cool exercise to do, and in group fashion. There wasn't a clear plan, it just kind of happened. Thanks for watching. Keep being real.